Ancapistan's last line of defense, Hopium. Why every anarcho-capitalist property defense scheme collapses under evolutionary pressure. Anarcho-capitalists imagine a utopia where property rights are protected without coercion. Using private institutions like rights enforcement agencies, private firms that pledge to defend rightful owners, insurance, arbitration, and voluntary militias. But each of these mechanisms fails when examined under the lens of evolutionary game theory and economic selection. They suffer from moral hazard, adverse selection, fragmented coordination, unverifiable claims to rightful ownership, and internal contradictions that collapse under real-world pressure. In contrast, evolutionary capitalism replaces faith-based enforcement with public reputation-weighted bidding, where reputation doubles as both currency and decision-making weight, and automatic alignment to productivity. It doesn't coexist with anarcho-capitalist defense. It consumes it. 1. Defense as a selection problem. Anarcho-capitalists imagine property defense as polite debate. But evolution rewards results, not arguments. Enforcement isn't about being right, it's about being effective. Defense is a selection problem: who gets protected, and why? ANCAP theory says a rights. Evolutionary capitalism says productivity. One preaches, the other wins. 2. Rights enforcement agencies, the defection trap. REAs are designed to defend the rightful owner. But in practice, they must investigate and verify ownership claims, which takes time, burns resources, and generates no profit. Operate under asymmetric information. Face rivals willing to enforce for higher-paying clients. Refusing a profitable aggressor means higher court and enforcement costs, lower revenue from poor clients, greater risk of losing to better-funded competitors. This creates a defection trap. Even REAs with good intentions are forced to drift toward profitability over principles. They become selective mercenaries, retroactively justifying their clients as rightful. Worse, when REAs face enforcement agents backed by evolutionary capitalism's bidding logic, they're already behind. Evolutionary enforcers don't need to prove ownership, they act on public bids and productivity data. By the time the REA finishes investigating, the transfer has already occurred. To intervene, the REA must negotiate a price with a client who likely can't afford to fund a war against a more productive, reputation-backed system. 3. Insurance defense, every REA flaw, plus financial rot. Insurance is REA failure wrapped in paperwork. It adds risk, moral hazard, and fantasy. Clients act recklessly, insurers dodge payouts, and everyone pretends this prevents conflict. Moral hazard ensures the very thing being insured against happens more often. It's not just ineffective, it's counterproductive. Insuring against crime invites crime. Covering losses encourages risk. It's like trying to prevent arson by announcing a lottery where your ticket is your house catching fire. Suddenly, every porch in town smells like gasoline. Instead of preventing disaster, you've launched a fireworks show where everyone's playing with matches and betting on the payout. Instead of discouraging the risk, you've created a game where the rational move is to light the match yourself. The incentive isn't to avoid risk, it's to exploit coverage. Insurance doesn't prevent fire. It hands out matches and praise. ANCAP logic at its finest. 4. Arbitration, false neutrality in a broken ecosystem. Arbitration assumes peaceful resolution, but arbitrators lack enforcement power. They are financially biased toward repeat clients. No global reputation layer exists to punish bias or error. Even worse, arbitrators face a fundamental instability: the high bidder has no incentive to submit to arbitration unless the outcome favors them. Any arbitrator who regularly rules against high bidders will lose business or be bypassed entirely. Over time, arbitrators drift toward enforcing high bids, not because it's just, but because it's profitable. In evolutionary capitalism, arbitration is obsolete. Disputes resolve through transparent bidding, where resistance incurs reputational cost. 5. Mediation, arbitration with even less bite. Mediation is often offered as a softer, more voluntary form of arbitration. But if arbitration is toothless, mediation is just therapy with paperwork. It inherits all of arbitration's problems: no enforcement, no public accountability, and no tie to system-wide productivity. Just talk, delay, and ultimately, surrender to whoever has more resources and patience. Disputes resolve through transparent bidding, where resistance incurs reputational cost. Truth is measured by systemic productivity, not narratives. 6. National defense, fractured, starved, and slow. ANCAP militias are defense via group chat. No funding. No coordination. Just vibes. Meanwhile, reputation-backed systems, where reputation functions like programmable money, act with purpose, capital, and speed. Without central planning, ANCAP defense is slow, fragmented, and doomed. Evolution doesn't wait for consensus. Militias don't coordinate. Free riders don't pay. Defense budgets rely on hope. Slow growth becomes death. Evolutionary capitalism just outscales them. 7. A evolutionary defense, reputation is the immune system. Evolutionary capitalism's solution to national defense isn't a standing army, it's the invasion of the monetary and reputational system itself. Once embedded, its logic rewires incentives, reallocates capital, and dissolves rival structures from within. Defense becomes endogenous. Resistance becomes feudal. In evolutionary capitalism, property is allocated to the highest productivity bidder. Defense flows to those whose capital yields reputational profit. Conflict incurs reputational loss. National defense is just an extension of capital protection. No contracts. No voluntarism. No faith-based appeals. Enforcement emerges as a byproduct of evolutionary economics. 8. ANCAP courts, doomed to litigate the undefined. Misesian subjective and ordinal value, in brief. Subjective value exists only in the mind of the individual, it's personal, not intrinsic. Ordinal, people rank their preferences, but the intensity of value can't be measured or compared across individuals. Anarcho-capitalists also have no answer for children. If value is subjective and ordinal, a child's preferences are just as sovereign as an adult's. But letting toddlers make legal decisions is insane, so ANCAPs defer to parents. Yet if parents override those preferences, they're violating the child's subjective value. There's no way out. Either you admit some objective threshold of maturity exists, or you let children sue their parents over bedtime. In short, anarcho-capitalism can't parent without breaking its own rules. Libertarians are obsessed with restitution. Why? Because they always imagine themselves as the victim. It's a worldview built on self-perceived martyrdom. But restitution, far from being just, is a system riddled with economic pathology. Sunk cost fallacy, it attempts to make whole past harms regardless of future value, misallocating resources in the process. Moral hazard, it rewards people for being harmed, or claiming to be, thereby incentivizing risk-taking, exaggeration, and fraud. Asymmetric incentives, they never imagine themselves as the ones burdened with doing the restoring, only as the ones being restored. This is why anarcho-capitalist courts inevitably devolve into drama and dysfunction. Not only do they lack objective metrics, they cling to subjective victimhood as a guiding principle. Anarcho-capitalists claim that private courts will peacefully resolve disputes. But they forget that in the absence of government, there is no universal authority to supply the very thing arbitrators need most, a shared standard by which to rule. Without a centralized legislative or reputational metric, each court must invent its own logic of justice, creating a patchwork of mutually unintelligible standards. So when an ANCAP judge asks a victim to put a dollar amount on their suffering, they're satisfying subjectivity but violating ordinal theory. Value can't be measured, only ranked, so any dollar amount is arbitrary. The entire restitution process collapses under its own logic. Either they abandon ordinalism or admit the ruling is made up. It's a lose-lose baked into their theory. Or base rulings on vibes, rhetoric, and arbitrary preference. Anarcho-capitalists imagine that courts and arbitrators will peacefully resolve disputes over property and harm. But in practice, they're handed unsolvable questions. How far above and below does property extend? Does a drone violate your property rights? What about underground aquifers or satellite networks? What counts as a violation? Is a bad smell a rights violation? What about noise, light pollution, or electromagnetic interference? How do you price subjective harm? A neighbor's pig farm causes mental anguish due to its smell. If value is subjective, as libertarians often insist, then so is disutility. The victim could claim $10 million in damages. On what basis would the arbitrator deny it? The entire process becomes arbitrary. What if both parties claim conflicting rights? One party builds a fence that blocks sunlight, the other claims loss of value. Who is right when there's no shared standard of productivity? Arbitrators have no global ledger, no systemic feedback, and no objective metric. They must invent ad hoc rules, rationalize outcomes after the fact, satisfy both sides with irreconcilable interpretations. The result is legal balkanization and regulatory drift. Every court becomes its own isolated logic game. In evolutionary capitalism, these disputes are resolved by reputational consequences. If an action causes measurable drops in productivity or downstream value, the actor is penalized. Property is allocated not based on belief or harm claims, but on expected future output. ANCAP courts must litigate ideology. Evolutionary capitalism simply reallocates capital. 9. Conclusion, the end of ANCAP defense. Anarcho-capitalists hate collectivism, yet believe justice emerges if everyone just vibes hard enough. No metrics. No payments. Just faith. They reject central planning, then build legal systems that rely on it. They ignore cost-benefit because they never pay the cost. It's democracy without ballots, just moral claims with no price tag. Evolutionary capitalism doesn't argue. It selects. It grows. It absorbs. REAs don't lose to better arguments. They lose to better bidders, and the agents that take their offer. In the end, Ancapistan isn't overthrown. It's swallowed whole, like a soggy snack in the path of an economic black hole.